The hook. In the late 19th century, the world was shrinking, but one thin strip of land, only 50 miles wide, stood as a middle finger to global commerce. To cross it meant certain death by yellow fever. To go around it meant a 13,000-mile journey through the treacherous storms of Cape Horn. Men called it the white man's grave. Yet one man decided to move mountains, defy 2 oceans, and rewrite the geography of the planet. This is not just a story of dirt and steam. It is the story of how America forced the Earth to bleed to become a superpower. Part 1. The Ghost of the French Ambition. The year was 1881. Ferdinand de Lesseps, the man who had conquered the sands of Egypt with the Suez Canal, arrived in the jungles of Panama with the ego of a god. He believed that if he could cut through the desert, he could slice through the spine of the Americas. But Panama was not Egypt. The cane came with champagne, fine linens, and an utter ignorance of the tropical wilderness. De Lesseps insisted on a sea-level canal, a flat ditch that ignored the massive Culebra Cut, a mountain range of unstable shale and clay. As the sun beat down, the rains began, and with the rain came the silent killers, Aedes aegypti and Anopheles. Within months, the French hospitals were full. Men woke up with black vomit, the terrifying hallmark of yellow fever. They died by the thousands. The French engineers, brilliant but stubborn, buried their dead in the morning and tried to dig the earth in the afternoon. But the jungle fought back. For every cubic yard of earth they moved, the mudslides of the rainy season moved 2 back. By 1889, the French venture collapsed in a spectacle of bankruptcy and scandal. $287 million was gone. 22,000 men were dead, and a graveyard of rusted machinery lay rotting in the swamp. Panama had defeated the greatest engineers of Europe. Enter Teddy Roosevelt. In 1901, the youngest president in U.S. history took office with a singular vision. The United States must control the seas. To do that, the Navy needed a shortcut. The diplomacy was brutal. When Colombia, which then owned Panama, refused Roosevelt's terms, TR didn't wait. In a move that defined big stick diplomacy, the U.S. backed a Panamanian revolution. On November 3, 1903, with the U.S. Navy looming offshore, Panama declared independence. Days later, the Hay-Bunau-Varilla Treaty was signed, giving the U.S. a 10-mile-wide canal zone in perpetuity. The Americans arrived in 1904, inheriting the French ruins. At first, they made the same mistakes. They focused on digging before they focused on living. The panic of the Yellow Jack began to sweep through the American camps. Part 3. The War on the Mosquito. The true hero of this story isn't an engineer. It was a doctor named William Crawford Gorgas. He had a theory that seemed insane at the time, that mosquitoes, not bad air or filth, carried the diseases killing the workers. Roosevelt's critics laughed, but Gorgas was relentless. He demanded a fortune to kill every mosquito in Panama. He ordered the screening of every window, the draining of every puddle, and the pouring of oil onto every stagnant pond. He even ordered that every foot of the canal zone be fumigated. In a feat of public health never seen before, Gorgas succeeded. By 1906, yellow fever was eradicated from the isthmus, and malaria was under control. For the first time in history, humans had conquered the tropical climate. The stage was set for the greatest construction project in the history of the world. Part 4. Moving the Mountains. John Stevens and later George Goethals took over the engineering. They realized de Lesseps's dream of a sea-level canal was impossible. Instead, they would build a bridge of water. They decided to dam the massive Chagres River to create Gatun Lake, the largest man-made lake of its time. Then they would build gargantuan concrete locks to lift ships 85 feet above sea level, carry them across the continent, and lower them back down on the other side. The Culebra Cut was the heart of the battle. It was a 9-mile stretch of mountain that had to be pulverized. Millions of pounds of dynamite were used. Steam shovels the size of houses worked 24/7. The earth was so unstable that it literally flowed like a slow-moving river. Steam shovels were buried in seconds by landslides. Trains were tossed like toys. The scale was unimaginable. They excavated enough earth to build a great wall from New York to San Francisco. The concrete used in the locks could build a sidewalk around the entire world. The steel gates of the locks were as tall as 7-story buildings, yet so perfectly balanced they could be moved by a small electric motor. Part 5. The Opening of the World. On August 15, 1914, while Europe was descending into the darkness of World War I, the SS Ancon made the first official transit. The Atlantic and the Pacific were finally married. The cost was staggering, $375 million, billions in today's currency, and over 5,600 American lives, plus the 22,000 French deaths. But the world was forever changed. A ship traveling from New York to San Francisco no longer had to brave the graveyard of ships at Cape Horn. It simply sailed through the jungle. America had proven it could do the impossible. The Panama Canal became the symbol of the American century, a testament to what happens when scientific brilliance meets raw, unrelenting power.
Part 6. The American Lake and the Echo of Empire. The completion of the Panama Canal in 1914 didn't just open a trade route, it birthed a new kind of society and a geopolitical fortress that would define the American century. For the next several decades, the 10-mile-wide strip of land known as the Canal Zone became a curious tropical slice of the United States, a place where the American dream was built on top of the world's most complex plumbing. The rise of the Zonians. As the dust settled from the construction, a permanent community of American workers, known as Zonians, took root. Life in the zone was a strange paradox. A socialist utopia, while the U.S. championed capitalism, the Canal Zone was the most successful government-run enterprise in its history. The Panama Canal Company provided everything: housing, groceries, hospitals, and bowling alleys. The tropical suburb. Imagine a 1950s Ohio neighborhood transplanted into a jungle. Manicured lawns sat feet away from impenetrable rainforests. It was a gated community on a continental scale, where the stars and stripes flew high, and the currency was the U.S. dollar. A fortress in the fog of war. The canal's true test came during World War II. It was the jugular vein of the Allied effort, the strategic shortcut. The U.S. Navy could swing its fleet from the Atlantic to the Pacific in days rather than weeks. This mobility was the secret weapon that allowed the U.S. to fight a two-front war. Defense at all costs. Fearing a Japanese or German airstrike, the U.S. turned the isthmus into a massive fortress. Anti-aircraft guns were hidden in the hills, and secret tunnels were carved into the rock. The canal wasn't just a bridge, it was a shield. The winds of change. The 1977 treaties. By the 1960s, the world was changing. Nationalism was rising in Panama. To the Panamanians, the Canal Zone was a state within a state, a colonial leftover that split their country in half. Tensions boiled over in the 1964 flag riots, signaling that the status quo could not hold.
In 1977, President Jimmy Carter made one of the most controversial decisions in American foreign policy. He signed the Torrijos-Carter Treaties, promising to hand over the canal to Panama by the end of the century. The backlash. In the U.S., the move was met with fury. Critics argued, "We built it, we paid for it, and we should keep it." The diplomacy. Carter argued that a hostile Panama was a bigger threat to the canal than a friendly one in control. It was a gamble on the future of international cooperation. Midnight, December 31, 1999. The handover. As the world braced for the Y2K bug, a more historical event was taking place in the tropics. At the stroke of midnight, the American flag was lowered, and the Panamanian flag rose alone over the administration building. After 85 years, the United States left. Many skeptics predicted the canal would fall into disrepair or be choked by corruption. They were wrong. Under Panamanian management, the canal became more profitable and efficient than ever before. The 21st century. The Neo-Panamax expansion. By the 2000s, the titan of the jungle was getting too small. The global shipping industry had moved to post-Panamax ships, behemoths that could carry 3 times more cargo than the canal could handle. In 2016, Panama completed a $5.25 billion expansion project. They built a third set of locks, even larger than the originals. These new locks use water-saving basins that recycle 60% of the water used in each transit, a marvel of modern green engineering. Part 7. The Shadows of the Zone, Segregation and the Secret War. While the Panama Canal is often celebrated as a triumph of engineering and medicine, it also hides a darker, more complex social history. For decades, the canal zone wasn't just a feat of physics, it was a strictly controlled social experiment that mirrored the deepest flaws of the era it was born in. The silver and gold caste system. During construction and well into the mid-20th century, the U.S. implemented a systemic form of segregation known as the silver and gold payroll system. It was apartheid in the jungle, enforced by the U.S. government. The gold roll. These were the white American employees. They were paid in U.S. gold coin, lived in luxury housing with plumbing, and had access to the best schools and hospitals. The silver roll. These were the West Indian and local workers, mostly from Barbados and Jamaica. They were paid in local silver coin, worth half as much, lived in cramped wooden barracks, and used separate and inferior drinking fountains, post offices, and commissaries. This system was the backbone of the canal's operation. While the gold employees were the face of the canal, it was the silver workers who performed the most dangerous tasks, dying in the thousands from dynamite accidents and landslides. Their struggle for dignity remains a poignant, often overlooked chapter of the American story in the tropics. The West Point of the Americas. Beyond commerce, the canal zone served as the nerve center for American military influence in the Western Hemisphere. Hidden within the dense foliage of the zone was the U.S. Army School of the Americas at Fort Gulick, the Jungle Warfare School. During the Vietnam War and the Cold War, the canal's jungles became a training ground for the Green Berets. Soldiers were taught to survive on snakes and rainwater, and how to fight in environments where the humidity was as much an enemy as the opposing force. Geopolitical chess. The Canal Zone was the Southern Command, also known as Southcom, headquarters. From here, the U.S. monitored the entire continent, ensuring that the bridge of the world never fell into communist hands. It was a place of high-stakes espionage, secret radio towers, and hidden bunkers carved into the volcanic rock. The Dry Canal and the new competition. As we look at the canal in 2026, the Titan faces challenges that its creators never imagined. The Mexican alternative. With the Panama Canal struggling with historic droughts due to El Niño, Mexico has recently launched the Interoceanic Corridor, a dry canal consisting of high-speed rail lines connecting the Atlantic and Pacific. The Nicaraguan Ghost. For years, a Chinese billionaire proposed a rival canal through Nicaragua. While the project eventually stalled, it reminded the world that the Panama Canal's monopoly is not guaranteed. The legacy of the Titan. Today, when an American tourist stands on the observation deck at the Miraflores locks, they see a miracle of 1914 still working with 21st-century precision. They see the massive Neo-Panamax ships carrying 15,000 containers of electronics, cars, and fuel, passing through locks that operate purely on the power of gravity. The Panama Canal is more than a waterway. It is a monument to the American spirit, a mixture of breathtaking genius, ruthless pragmatism, and the relentless drive to bend the physical world to human will. It remains the most important 50 miles of water on the planet.
Part 8. The Invisible Siege, the 2026 Reality, and the Final Echo. The story of the Panama Canal did not end with the handover in 1999, nor did it freeze in the triumph of the 2016 expansion. As we stand in February 2026, the canal is facing its most complex adversary yet, one that cannot be fought with dynamite or doctors. This is the era of the invisible siege. The Salted Lake. By 2026, the canal's greatest strength, its innovative water-saving basins, has become a double-edged sword. To keep the massive Neo-Panamax ships moving during the record droughts of the mid-2020s, the Panama Canal Authority began recycling water at an unprecedented rate. But this came with a hidden cost: salinity. The fresh water of Gatun Lake, which provides drinking water for half of Panama's population, is slowly turning salty. Ocean water from the Atlantic and Pacific creeps into the lake with every lock cycle. Scientists are now racing to balance the world's thirst for trade with a nation's thirst for water. The bridge of water is no longer just an engineering marvel, it is a fragile biological laboratory. The $8.5 billion gamble. To survive the next century, Panama has launched a massive $8.5 billion water security strategy. The centerpiece is the Rio Indio Reservoir, a project designed to dam a new river and tunnel its water into Gatun Lake. It is echoes of 1904, moving Earth, displacing communities, and altering the map of the jungle once again. The rise of the dry canal. For the first time in a century, the Panama Canal has a true rival. In 2026, Mexico's Interoceanic Corridor, a high-speed rail land bridge, has begun siphoning off cargo. While it cannot carry the volume of a ship, it offers something the canal currently lacks: predictability. In an era of weather whiplash, where the canal must frequently slash its daily transits due to low lake levels, global shippers are starting to hedge their bets. The final verdict: a titan's legacy. The Panama Canal began as a dream that broke a French empire. It was built by an American president who believed in manifest destiny, and realized by West Indian workers who paid for it in blood. It conquered the mosquito, carved through the continental divide, and survived the Cold War. Today, it remains the ultimate symbol of the Anthropocene, the age where humans became the dominant force on Earth. It is a reminder that while we can move mountains and join oceans, we are still ultimately guests of the planet's climate. The white man's grave is gone, replaced by a high-tech artery of global capitalism. But as the sun sets over the Miraflores locks, one thing is certain: as long as the world needs to trade, men will fight the jungle, the drought, and the salt to keep this thin ribbon of water alive.